Next up, we have a conversation with some of the largest beer companies in the U.S., and we're going to talk a little bit about their evolving craft portfolio strategies. But before I call up our panelists, I wanted to note a small change in our program for this afternoon. I know many of you were looking forward to hearing from Pete Marino, the president of Miller Coors' craft division, 10th and Blake. He unfortunately got caught in the blizzard that blanketed the Midwest a couple days ago and was unable to overcome some travel complications. So we weren't able to get him out here today, but the good news is that we do still have Felipe Spiegel, who is the outgoing president of AB's high-end craft business unit, and Ben Dollard, the president of Ballast Point's craft and specialty division, to chat with us. And hopefully through our prep call with Pete earlier this month, we'll be able to fill in the gaps where Pete is unable to. So a little bit of background on Felipe and Ben for those who don't know them. Felipe has worked for more than 17 years with AB. He led the high-end craft business unit, or he has led the craft business unit since 2014, and he will now be launching a new drinks venture in the Beyond Beer space. And maybe I can wrestle it out of you up here, and you can talk a little bit about it. He was also very instrumental in forming AB's craft acquisition strategy that included purchases of Goose Island, Blue Point, 10 Barrel, Elysian, Golden Road here in LA, Breckenridge, Four Peaks, Devil's Backbone, Karbach, and Wicked Weed. You guys all know the names. He also oversaw the creation of a Latin American-inspired craft brand in Miami called Vesa Sur, which I suspect you'll be spending some more time there now that you're moving to Miami, and as well as the purchases of Virtue Cider in Michigan and Spike Seltzer. At the same time, Ben Dollard is the president of Constellation Brands Craft and Specialty Division and a member of the beer leadership team at Constellation. He joined in 2001 as the senior vice president of Pacific Wine Partners. So he's got some experience from outside of the category, which is great. All of you know about Constellation's acquisitions, the biggest headline obviously being the $1 billion purchase of Ballast Point. They've also acquired Funky Buddha in Florida and Four Corners Brewing in Texas. So we're going to talk about all those brands and where they're headed. So I'll welcome to the stage Ben Dollard and Felipe Spiegel. Come on up. We need a longer music intro there. Thanks for joining me, guys. All right, so I mentioned it, sort of up top, all the acquisitions, and you guys are both heavily invested in the space now. As you guys start to think about where your interests are, oh, nice. Oh, that's perfect. I needed one of those. As you guys start to think about, thank you. As you guys start to think about kind of, where you're headed from here and where things are going next. Nice. What's next for Constellation and what's next for AB on the craft side of things? And I'll start with you, Ben.
Sure. Well, look, first and foremost, thanks for having me, and good afternoon, everybody. As you mentioned before, my background and my experience is across beverage alcohol, and so I think, as we think about the evolution of the high end, and specifically you think about the evolution of the craft space, and just the presentation we just heard. I think, our focus is very clearly going to be around the journey the consumer's taking, and I think if we start with that foundation and start thinking about, okay, where's the consumer going, and the complexity that the consumer sees day in, day out, well, then that helps guide where our portfolio goes. And you think about the evolution of the craft space, and you think about the evolution of our portfolio, and the kind of the leadership pursuit that we have at the high end. I would say that a lot of that local and remaining local, but yet being locally relevant elsewhere, I think is a big opportunity.
Yeah. Are you satisfied with your sort of current position with the 3 breweries that you have? Or are you looking for more?
Oh, I don't think we'd ever be entirely satisfied. So, we have a lot on our plate, and we've got, just a lot of opportunity ahead, I believe. The complement that each of the breweries have, be it Funky Buddha in Florida, with Four Corners Brewing Company joining the portfolio just quite recently, and obviously Ballast Point. We feel that they're there's a lot right now, but we'll continue to pursue and seek out new opportunities, be it from an innovation standpoint with the existing portfolio, or as we're thinking about the ABA space as well.
So is it still geographic in nature in terms of strategy, or are you starting to kind of broaden it out to product type now?
Yeah, I think, the aspiration, if you take Ballast Point as an example, we've just opened a tap room in Chicago. And, that's with a very clear desire to be bringing more consumers to our business and to the brand and getting really focused about building a brand. So, that journey has started. And, with a brand like Four Corners Brewing Company that we've just acquired, very clearly we feel there's an opportunity in Dallas specifically. But therein lies a brand which has tremendous Hispanic ties, and so it fits nicely into our portfolio.
Yeah. Felipe, how about for AB? I mean, I think you've maybe been quoted or have said that you guys are sort of pretty content with the portfolio that you have and maybe not interested in buying. Is that still the case?
Yeah, we are. I mean, I think we started a bit earlier on this last phase in terms of the partnerships. And I think from the beginning, it was clear for us that it was not about a number, but it was about finding a portfolio that could help us deliver to the vision. I'll comment in a second, and then finding the partners that could help us deliver that, and then work on a more sustainable way, right? So I mean, we have a leadership position as AB has a leadership position in the market, but we needed a portfolio that was more rounded and that would help us get into new occasions and also expand into new consumers. And I think that's what craft was already doing, right? So that's part of it, right? So how do you help on the trade up? How do you help on the expanding the category? And then in terms of portfolio, right? I mean, at the end, if you look at a portfolio, it was never about geography, but it was about different brands that had the connection to their local communities and also had a portfolio that was quite unique. Right, so sure, everyone has an IPA, but if you look into the flagships, most of the flagships are in different styles, which for us was important. And it's great to see that even though I worked for the last 4 to 5 years, but we also feel that we just started, right? And it's good to see some of the results, right? I mean, we have half of the top 10 growing brands, and that's a couple of years into the partnership. We have all of them or most of them performing really well in the whole market, right? So Golden Road have some of the partners here. It's growing 70% in California, which is a super competitive market. It's doing really well. We're growing 8 times the industry average, but it feels like we have enough things to start with, and we're just starting the journey for the next decade to come.
It's time to execute now.
Pretty much. I got a better partner to execute, right?
Yeah, so. yeah. You're leaving right at the hard part, right? You did the easy part. You spent the money, and now you're turning it over.
Exactly. Yeah. Pretty much.
That's smart. I like that. When you think about just buying strategies in general, both for your companies and kind of the M&A space across the board, as competition has intensified, as all these new breweries have opened, how much has the way that any buyer goes out and assesses the different opportunities, how much has that changed now that the business has become as complex as it has, and now that there's if you don't want to buy the guy on Street A, you can just walk over to Street B and buy that guy potentially, because there's that many breweries out there now. So where do you see that all going in the next couple of years, and how will people eventually potentially exit their businesses, or will they?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think from our perspective, again, as you consider the high end and the journey that we've been taking over the last couple of years in pursuing growth in the high end, a brand, and I'll use Four Corners as a really good example because it's very relevant. It's happening right now, and as we think about the strength of the core part of our portfolio. And obviously very successful part of the portfolio. It's how do we leverage that? And the craft business ties in perfectly to the overall strategy of our business, which is the leadership position in the high end. So, with a brand like Four Corners Brewing Company, when we have engagement and we start talking about that opportunity and we think about the evolution of the Hispanic consumer as an example, and just how that consumer is becoming more interested in exploring, and we have a very intimate understanding of that consumer. A brand like Four Corners Brewing Company really ties nicely because it's at the intersection of craft, yet it's talking to that new consumer coming into our space. So, that dialogue becomes very natural in my mind, and then you start to pursue the opportunity from there, and that's consistent with the other two brands that we've brought into the business as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a slightly different angle. It's funny because when we did the strategy and we started looking into it, we already knew this was going to happen, right? I mean, and I even was talking to someone in the morning. We had a graph of number of wineries in the U.S. that gets to 10,000. We had already a projection that we would have 10,000 craft breweries by 2020. I think the one thing, honestly, we didn't know, right, was that the slowdown of the category was going to be so quick, right, and people would start chasing each other so fast and stop doing what craft always did, right? And we can talk a little bit about that when we talk about innovation. So honestly, that I didn't see coming. So I think people ask, what would have done different in terms of strategy and partnership? Nothing. I think what changed is, if you look at the multiples or the business plan, a lot of it is related to projected growth, and with the industry growing nothing or low single digits, the business are valued much lower than not, right? And so that changed, right? So the valuation that was expected or paid before ain't happening today, period, right? The one thing, just reinforcing what we saw on our partners, and I think it's more critical today for anyone than ever, right? I mean, it's knowing what you stand for, having a very close or very good connection to the home market or to the local community. And doing products that are really outstanding, right? Because everyone says, no, we praise great beer, we have high quality beer and whatever it is, and you do average beer or below average beer. There's probably 100 breweries in the U.S. out of the 7,000 that do amazing beer. And I'm glad that, all of our partners are within those 100 breweries, right? It's not to say that we're the only ones, but we are the exception within everyone that's coming out. We're not the average. So I think more and more, what's the self-selection? So there's still going to be 10,000 breweries, right? 90% are going to be pubs, not necessarily packaged beers. And if you want to do a pub, that's great. But if you want to package, you want to expand, you're going to have to be freaking amazing, because the standard today that people are comparing you to is, it's not the average of the 7,000, is those 100 that have been already successful.
Yeah. Well, and you guys are in such different positions as companies. I mean, Constellation is still growing across the board. You're fortunate enough to have brands like Corona and Pacifico and Modelo that are growing, whereas Anheuser-Busch is really trying to offset some losses to its core business and looking for growth areas in order to continue moving forward. So that sort of is a nice step to the next question about where you guys look for growth in the future. Will it be with traditional beer products, and maybe it will for Constellation because you guys are still growing, or will it be in non-traditional areas, hard kombuchas, or some of these non-alcoholic beers that we're seeing, or low-calorie beers? Where are you guys looking for the next opportunity for growth within whatever we call is the beer category?
Yeah, I'd see it in a bunch of different buckets, if you will. One of the greatest attributes of the craft environment, and for all of us as an industry, is that we are natural innovators, right? I mean, I see it in our breweries, and I see it from our teams, and I see it across the board, that it is an incubator for ideas. And so our ability to continue to leverage that incubator has to be a very high priority for us, I think, because that's where a lot of really inspiring thoughts come out. And the other component of that is naturally our ability to interact one-on-one with our consumer, which again, I think as an industry, generally speaking, is a great advantage. So as we think about future lanes of growth and we think about the opportunity ahead for us, I'd say a lot of that innovation is going to become organic and will come out of that direct dialogue with the consumer, because the consumer is the boss, and our ability to have that dialogue is central. And then the other component, you think, those lines of consumption are getting entirely blurred. They're already blurred, and they're only going to continue to get blurred. And so, we see it because we participate in beer and wine and spirits, and we understand exactly what we just heard a moment ago, that the consumption when you walk into a supermarket or into a store, that the decision process may not have occurred yet. And it's not until you're presented with the opportunity that you think, okay, well, what is it I need tonight for my barbecue, or for the weekend family event, or for whatever. So it's how do you make sure that you're using that process to evaluate your innovation pipeline. And so the way we look at it is that we draw inspiration from that. And you might consider, some of the inspiration we're getting from High West Distillery now, and blending it, using those barrels to make a beer. Right. But we know the consumer is somewhat promiscuous sometimes too, and wants to try, different flavors and different styles. And that's exactly where we see a big opportunity to continue to push and grow.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, it sounds more like a build versus buy strategy, where you'll be more willing to create something internally and take it to market versus seek out innovative products that are existing and acquiring them.
Yeah, as I mentioned, we've got a lot on our plate right now, and that's exactly where we're focused. We also have a robust innovation platform, and from our perspective, obviously there's a craft component. We're very interested in the growth that we're seeing right now across the seltzer, and what we saw this past summer. And so how do we keep innovating and following the consumer? So for right now, that's exactly where we're focused.
Felipe, Beyond Beer, that's your new gig.
Yeah, I'll run from that, so I'll start answering something else.
Where's it all going? Where's Beyond
Beer?
Beer?
I'll come back to that in a second. But I think there are 2 points that I think that are important, right? And I have tremendous respect for Constellation and the performance, as well as for Miller Coors, especially on the craft portfolio, right? I mean, if you look at the growth that Pete has been driving, it's amazing. Even push folks internally. But to be clear, AB has a vision and a mission that Michelle, the new CEO, brought in, which is we want to lead future growth. So we're looking at these pockets, and we're going after them, right? And we want to guarantee that our portfolio, and by the way, the fastest growing brand in US is Michelob Ultra. Mm-hmm. It's not Modelo, it's not Corona. So we have pockets of growth. That's again, we will be betting more and more as we move forward. And we are brewers first and foremost. So the responsibility that we have on the position that we are into getting the category into a healthier position and getting beer back to growth, even before we bet on wine and spirits or the blurred categories, is huge, right? So we won't, we have some of the ventures we're getting into, and either through the innovation on our own craft breweries or through ZX Ventures, we're going to other spaces. But these are really side projects. Our role is to elevate beer and guarantee that in all the different segments, we are, if not the leaders, the ones that are leading growth. And if that won't happen this year, it's fine. We're here for the next many decades, right? And and I'm leaving. Mika is coming here. I'm pretty sure he's going to do a better job. Know him well. So I think we also have a pipeline of people that can help us take the business to the next level. I think quickly on the ZX or the new ventures or everything, right? I mean, it's obviously I don't have everything outlined. That's why it's not that confidential. It's just I don't have it. So it's as simple as that. It's like many of the folks here in the room. As you have an idea and you're starting the business, I think as soon as I know, you will be one of the first ones to. But I think the decision was probably, what I can't share at this point. I mean, first it was a personal decision, right? I mean, I got divorced. My wife is going back to Brazil. I needed more flexibility on time and travel. And being in Miami cuts the travel a little bit and gets me closer. And I didn't want to go to Brazil. So that for me is one piece. And I think the second one is, even though, like working almost 20 years at the company, I always felt like I managed my own business. I never really managed my own business, right? And it was the only thing I haven't done in my career, and now I'm doing that, right? So I think for me, those are the two critical things, right? So it needed to be in Miami, right? And I needed to be running it. Those were the two things I knew. And probably in the next couple of weeks, we'll have more of it. But it's not that complicated and not that creative.
Yeah, so it not that creative. I mean, Beyond Beer leaves it open to interpretation, I guess. And
No, that I can't say. It's definitely not in cannabis, right? So I've heard people tweeting I'm not doing that. I mean, it's Beyond Beer. It's non-malt based. It's in liquor, so that I can say. But what it is, we're still developing.
And I guess we've seen so much interest over the last couple of weeks, but particularly over the last few months, in these alcoholic kombuchas, and this year the breakout success of these hard seltzer brands. Where do you guys see that piece of the category going? And when you guys acquired Spike Seltzer, it was part of the high-end unit, right? So it is sort of part of craft, for better or worse, at this point, even if it's not a craft beer product. And I'm just kind of curious where all those products fit into the retail set, into the consumer's, decision-making process of what they're going to drink. Like, where do you see all of that going in the future years?
And it's good that Andy came up and pretty much share some of the stats in a simple way, right? Because at the end, we're simple human beings, we're simple people, and our decision process is much simpler than we might want to complicate, right? So if you look at some of the trends, I think the trends are more important than anything, right? So Andy mentioned need states more than occasions. People have need states, and whatever delivered to their need states, right? If they're going to buy, right, and they're going to gravitate to. And then there are some other trends into, U.S. is going to this bifurcation where middle class is getting squeezed, but whoever can pay for it will want to trade up, and wine and liquor did a much better job on, we're here fighting for a 30% premium, and wine is doing 120, 30, 300, 400, 500% premium, right? And craft is only a 30% or 40% premium to core beer, which we're leaving consumers' willingness to pay at the table, right? The other pieces, people are connected to experience, connected to stores, connected to better ingredients. So those are the things that people want, that we want for whatever we buy, right? And whoever is delivering. So when you think about seltzer, which brutes might be able to deliver somehow, if we can explain what it is, right? Is people want the buzz, but want lower calories, right? And don't want the sugar, right? So it's kind of a better FMB, right? Because basically you're getting the buzz you would get from a Rita's or from Mike's Hard, but you don't get the 250 calories that come with it, right? So I think the more, and even the provocations we have on innovation is like the more consumer needs you're actually addressing for people, the more successful your innovation can be, right? So it's almost like, okay, how many boxes can you check? But not thinking, I'll start with malts and hops and either a can or a bottle. If you start that way, you're already going to do something that someone has already done, right? You got to start with where are people, what people need, what are they consuming, or what do they want, and what are the analogs in other categories that are delivering that to you. That is where real, and if you're solving consumer problems, right, real consumer problems, which, I'm very respectful of the 3-tier system, but doesn't help us much. In terms of solving consumers, real problems, right? It's super inconvenient. And in other categories, you can buy online, you can get it directly. It's like you can participate, co-create, and here it's like, okay, you got to think about it. Then it goes to TTB, and it's I don't know how many weeks. Then we have done a disservice to ourselves, have already, I don't know how many brand names that we have already registered, so there's nothing you can launch that hasn't already been launched. And again, so I think the more boxes you can check in terms of really addressing consumer needs, the more successful we're going to be. The more you're doing things that you have already been done.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if I could just build on that, because I think, to your question, if you just look at the underlying trends, right, what's happening in the marketplace, what happened over last summer, what's happening generally, and some of the headwinds and challenges, and certainly the slowdown that you were talking about. If you just look at the underlying trends and you look at how people want to live their lives, and generally speaking, if you just consider health and well-being, or if you consider, just the authenticity people want in their lives and the experience they want to have when they make a purchase, we're seeing that play out in the industry, right? And that's certainly what we saw happen over, certainly over the summer. And so I think as you think, a lot of paths lead back to kind of where the consumer's headed. And that's a journey that we all take. I think having, and again, the great opportunity for all of us is that we have the ability to talk directly to them.
Where do you guys look for innovation or for inspiration on your innovation when you're looking outside of the category?
Yeah, I mean, given that we have, a big well of insights across, total beverage alcohol, we really do start there, and we have, intimate dialogue with our consumers on a very regular basis. But then, I think as you consider across, any aspect of life, particularly for adults who are looking to or aspiring for, a more healthy lifestyle, so we'll look there. You talk about, okay, where else might we go? I think, we're constantly exploring new domains.
Yeah.
And I think that's pretty exciting.
Let's switch gears a little bit. We've obviously been talking a lot about sort of non-traditional beer, and I think that speaks to the evolution of the category as a general. And I'm curious, kind of, as you guys think about just the way the category is evolving, what questions you guys are asking yourselves internally. We've seen an uptick in the number of brewery closures and bankruptcies. We've seen large, established regional brewers really start to struggle. There are a few exceptions, but I think over the last 2 years, amongst the top 50 brewers, half of them were either flat or in decline. So, there's this sort of soft spot in the middle where people are really struggling. And, there's a whole ton of competition, obviously, as we've already discussed. So how are your companies taking the smaller craft brands that you own and navigating sort of the turbulent waters that are out there and finding success with the products that you do have and have invested lots of money behind?
Yeah, well, I think there's no doubt there are turbulent waters, and there's no doubt there are headwinds. So being very authentic and staying true to what it is that the foundation that you started with is essential. And our ability to tell the story and to be very proud of that story is central to what we do too. So our tap rooms play an important part in that. Because again, that gives us an opportunity to interact directly and to talk directly, and for our brewers to really experiment and be creative and to express themselves. So it starts with the brand, the fundamentals of brand building and telling the story. And then from there, I think we look to expand. But there's a lot of ambassadors out there. Once you've engaged with them, and that's exactly where we're focused.
And you haven't gotten much pushback on all the expansion through the tap room from the 3-tier system, or what's been the feedback there?
Yeah, I mean, look, very clearly we're very much aligned with the 3-tiered system. Very much believe in it. The way
not so much in California. Well, you are aligned with it, but you took a few wholesalers out here pretty recently.
Well, I think there's
You've challenged it.
Yeah,
sure.
and I think as we think about consolidation that happens at all angles of the business, that's a constant, and it's been a part of the industry for some time. And I think as you think about the expansion in California as an example, and specifically how we think about our craft business in California. We are expanding our tap rooms. We're about to open a new retail location in downtown Disney. We're going to do the same in San Francisco, and the reason we do that is because of our ability to interact with our consumer and then pursue a collective win. And that collective win comes about by greater innovation. We're absolutely committed to building our brand outside the tap rooms and doing exactly that, building a brand. And that's exactly why why we're investing in these tap rooms and why we feel they're just a good mouthpiece to the consumer.
Yeah, well, there was some data recently that suggested that, tap rooms are good for the category, and that if you want to get people to drink more beer, go figure, you bring them to a brewery. And I definitely I see that piece of the business, but at some point there's going to be some retailer and wholesaler pushback. Felipe, have you guys witnessed any of that? And where do you see sort of the taproom piece of the business going long term?
Also, given the size of our portfolio, right, and the spread, I mean, our tap room and pub business is really small, right? I mean, we have around 30 versus the 7,000 brewers that we talked about, and that's 30 within 12 craft breweries, right? And it's not the expansion is not a significant part of our portfolio, and we share that with our wholesalers through the wholesaler panel, so they understand the strategy and that we're not part of that. That's not part of the conversation with them, right? Or part of the issue with them. Let's say that way. They appreciate what we have in terms of brand building, and they know that we're not here to not respect the three-tier system. I think the role. So you mentioned, I think there's definitely a competition to the on-premise. So there's always two ways you can look at it, right? I mean, it is taking business from the on-premise, and that affects the wholesalers, right? And it's not my 30, it's the 7,000 that are out there, right?
It's partly your 30.
Yeah, sure, significant. Okay. Yeah, and the other piece of that which you addressed, right? Which is, but there is a much better beer experience within the taproom environment than not, right? So how much that is helping us, sorry, man, how much that is helping us develop the category? Well, what would have happened if those tap rooms didn't exist to the category, right? In terms, so that I don't know, but I would imagine that category would be much slower, or the challenges would be much tougher, right? So I think for us, again, we don't think that for what we have, we are part of the conversation of tap room affecting the on-premise, and our wholesalers don't think so either, based on the conversations we have through the wholesaler panel. But it's really important for us to connect to the consumers for the innovation, right? It's where our innovation comes from, and I think for the industry is really important for category development.
How about 5 years out? When you think about where things are headed and what beer looks like in 5 years, I mean, what does the beer category look like in 5 years, especially when you think about an experience like walking into a brew pub and all the times you've done it?
Give Ben some time. He probably has a better perspective on also looking at other categories. I mean, I think the only thing, if whatever I say, the only thing I know is that I'm going to be wrong, right? Because if I had to say what happened in the last 4 years, when I started, I probably would get most of it wrong. We talked about the 10,000 brewers. I think that's going to happen, but I also think that expectations from consumers are much more elevated than not in terms of what they're going to expect, right? So I think it's going to be the ones that are going to be surviving are going to be higher end and doing something for the category, more than just I'm the local guy, because there are going to be so many local guys that the new local guy is going to be the one that's going to be the coolest one, unless we're doing something that makes people come back. And I think that's a lot of the challenge that we have for our own locations, right? I mean, talk about headwinds, right? I mean, on top of the headwind of being a regional and everything, AB it's probably the only one that gets the headwind from a partnership. And many of the other folks that are here have some other partner that don't get, half of the headwind or the pushback that we got on the beginning.
I'm assuming that you're talking about those that have private equity money, or
or even Constellation or Heineken, or they don't get
backlash.
Or Miller Coors. I mean, for some reason, or for many reasons, maybe from the baggage from the past, we probably got more backlash than. But that doesn't matter. It's life. We knew it from the beginning. But it means that we got to do a better job, right? And people keep on coming to our pubs and and to our breweries and everything, and our brands keep on growing. But that's because you got to focus on the things that people want, right? I mean, it's great products, great experience, great beer and food experience, right? And great stores and events that people are going to remember, right?
Yeah. Outside of the tap room, how do you guys recruit new consumers to the category? I mean, we heard it in Andy's presentation, the changing sort of demographics of the United States, and I think by 2045, Hispanics will comprise about a quarter of the population, and the U.S. will actually be minority white. And I think that was sort of the point that Andy was speaking to, is that are we still selling to consumers from a decade or 2 decades ago when clearly things are moving in a different direction?
Yeah, and I think just to come back, I want to come back to your prior question also, because the one constant, as you wind the clock forward 5 years, wind the clock forward 10 years, the one constant that we can all take to the bank is it's change, right? It's going to continue to change, and the lines of consumption are going to continue to get blurred. So, as we think about collectively, how do we engage new consumers? How do we bring new consumers to our business? Therein lies the big question, and so, as I think about the Hispanic consumer, and clearly, again, we've got a lot of interaction with the Hispanic consumer, and you think about the female Hispanic consumer, and how do we engage them into the craft space and really talk directly in a very personal and authentic fashion. And again, a real example for us is the Four Corners recent partnership out of Texas is designed to do exactly that. It's just a great intersection, very much Hispanic inspired and very authentic, yet is talking to this evolution of a consumer that is very big and very meaningful. And so that engagement and finding ways to bring new consumers to our business is central and certainly going to be paramount as we think about 5-10 years down the track. And I think, one of the great attributes we have as a business, as an industry, is that we can do that. Not all parts of the business have that. All parts of the industry have that. And so we've got to keep maintaining that direct dialogue.
Yeah, I would. I think some things we didn't mention. First, I didn't say any super exciting yet, so I'm super excited to comment this last question. No, I think there are 3 points that I didn't talk enough, which I think are super important. Right. One of them is, if you want to have a diverse category, you got to have a diverse team. So, probably in the last 2 years, most of my time was listening to my folks and changing the team and changing the ways of work so we can also be inclusive. Having a diverse team and you don't hear, listening to them doesn't help. So I think that has been a massive effort on our headquarters, and now we're moving down to the craft breweries, and some have done a good job, some have not, right? So guaranteeing that our teams reflect the consumers we want to touch is critical, right? And also that we're listening to them. I think the second piece is like doing things that, betting on things. I mean, we're going to be fast followers on some things, right? So we didn't come out with Brut IPA, but you got to get something out, right? But I think when you look at Crush from 10 Barrel, right, as an example, right? I mean, it's like, how do you bet on things that no one has done, right? And they're really hard to do. They're really different, right? And I think if we don't do enough, right, then the industry is still going to be stale, right? So I think that's probably the second one that for me is critical. And then the third one, which I think we fail as an industry, and I think I did leading the industry on the first 2 years, right? Which is like talking to the same audience, right? And because if we love the people that love beer, right? We love the beer geeks. We love to be connected to them, to be respected by them. But if you only talk to them, how are you going to expand the category, right? So a massive effort that we have been having, either connecting our brands, but especially on educating the category, has been on lifestyle. So let's connect to sports. So we're talking about this week. I think it was in Men's Health or Runner's World, or a piece on Team Faith, which is our innovation brewer in Goose Island. That's super fast runner.
Did see that, yeah.
So for me, that type of error, it doesn't come by chance. This is us getting out of our echo chamber, right, and talking to people that could love us but don't know us yet as a category, right? And I think for some time I tried to convince the BA and the industry to come on board and talk about it, and I think you always pushed me, well, what are you doing about it? So I stopped talking and we started doing, right? Because if people don't want to do it together, we're the leaders, we're going to do it by ourselves and benefits everyone, fine. It's what we got to do from the position that we're in. But I think, diversity and inclusion, we all got to do more, right? The piece of doing different things, because, if we're all going to launch a light lager, sorry, there are pretty good light lagers already there, so we got to do something else that's already not available, and talk to more people, right?
Well, that seems like a pretty great way to end. I know we're just over time, and they're flashing the red lights at us.
Yes, they are.
Thank you guys so
Okay.
much for your insight. I really appreciate your time. Cheers.